Training, learning and development is pretty much about models. It's about constructs, it's about a vocabulary that people have absorbed over the years, a lot of it learning from each other. And far and away the most important of those is what's known as the systematic training model, ISD in the States, Instructional Systems Design. And the idea is that through the identification of training needs, you go on and plan and design the training, you then deliver the training, and at the end of the day you evaluate the training outcome and you put in a loop at the end. The art of the trainer was the ability to identify training needs, then plan and design and deliver and evaluate it. The first model is this. We take the participant from unconscious incompetence through conscious incompetence to conscious competence and unconscious competence, and that is most easily spoken of in the skills arena. So if you took someone who was from the middle of the desert there and discussed swimming with them as a serious proposition, they would probably not know what you're talking about. They would be unconsciously incompetent. But if you showed them a video of somebody swimming, they would then realise that they are consciously incompetent. And if you then took them through swimming, if you are struggling to swim, if you're not a confident swimmer, you are actually thinking a lot about breathing. That's the key thing, you've got to get your rhythm right. So you are consciously competent. You can swim all right, but you're actively thinking. One of the absolute central, well-accepted, well-established models is Kolbs' model on how people learn. It's called the experiential learning cycle, and it says that people learn by a concrete and immediate experience followed by reflective observation, then abstract conceptualization, and then active experimentation. Peter Honey and Alan Mumford took that and developed what they called a learning cycle round it. What they argued was that all of us had a preference for learning at a particular stage in the cycle. And in fact, in their original work, they sort of put them at the in-between interstices around the cycle. The four categories that they came up with were activist, pragmatist, reflector and theorist. What I think happens with Honey and Mumford in practice is that you get the Honey and Mumford questionnaire in a training learning event. Is that what you people are doing with it? Yeah, okay. And you give it out and you get people to fill it in and you have a little check, an exercise room, how many of you are reflectors, how many of you are activists, how many are theorists. You might put the theorists together to discuss what the problems they have. You might put the theorists with the reflectors. So you put the theories with the activists to talk about the clash. What Honey and Mumford would say is that one of the things that you ought to encourage people to do is to develop in the weaker parts of the learning cycle. So if you're a pragmatist, you want to think about what would be involved in more reflective learning and things like that. And that's the use of it. I have never to this day seen more use of the Honey and Mumford Learning Styles questionnaire than that. Has anyone else? So it's a useful device for self-awareness in a learning course. The skill set in today's economy has shifted. The skills that are valuable. This was a very important piece of work. It was called Skills at Work. It's a piece of government research. The last report that's been published indicates that there are two big rising skills in the workplace today, one of which is the obvious one, which is technology skills. More than half of the workforce in the UK today regard the PC as an essential tool of their trade. And another 25% of the UK population on top of that, who are not regarding PC as an essential job, are using advanced technology in the workplace to some degree or other. The second rising skill set in the UK economy, according to this survey, and I'm waiting for the 2011 survey results in 2012, are what may be called influencing skills. Now, this was a bundle of skills These were soft skills. They were about getting work done through other people to whom you did not have a direct report relationship. It was about assertiveness skills, it was about negotiating skills, it was about writing long or short documents, whole series of different skills. How do people acquire those skill sets? How do people acquire those technology skill sets in practice, and how do they acquire the influencing skill sets? I'm going to ask you how you learned PowerPoint. How many of you learned primarily through a course? Or one? How many of you learned through the e-learning intervention? None? So how many of us actually, by and large, learn through looking around ourselves and practicing? Yes, okay. Now we all know this, don't we? Okay. Now, the second example of influencing skills is not so clear-cut, and we could debate that ad nauseum. But what I would argue is that a lot of our experience on influencing skills, in its broader sense, comes from the feedback from an effective developmental boss or good colleagues. So those people who sit down and say, look, it isn't working out what you're doing now, what do you think is wrong? So it's a sort of coaching, support and challenge intervention rather than the taught course. What we are seeing in the modern economy, and the phrase I liked was the service-led and knowledge-driven economy, because I think that expresses the economic change best, is that we are seeing a shift from training, which is an instructor-led contest-based intervention, to learning. And we're seeing more emphasis on learning and the learner. This issue about motivation is becoming increasingly important. But the message is that we are seeing, as those skill sets that matter in the workplace change, a shift from an emphasis on top-down learning through top-down instruction to a much broader pattern on learning, training and development. I mean, are your clients, the people you're speaking to on the phone, aware of these sorts of skill shifts, do you think?
I'm used to a model where the key responsibility, and I don't remember who made this model, is on the manager of the learner.
Right, okay, yeah.
To ensure the learning, foster the learning, provide the right environment. Okay. And our evaluations are based on success cases where it's not just up to the trainer or up to the learner, but on all the circumstances surrounding the learner. Yeah. So I don't know whether that's still a valid or popular model or not.
Well, I think it is the short answer. And the model, I mean, we can talk about which particular model it is. What is unquestionably true is that as a consequence of those changing skill sets, there is an enormous shift in responsibility going on to the line manager in organisations. You know, that is just beyond questions, mainly through the performance appraisal system. And there are obvious questions about the line management capability, line management willingness, etc. But certainly when it comes to some of those soft skills around influencing skills, then pretty clearly the effective line manager is the person who is in the position to develop those.
I don't talk to clients every day, but my impression is that a lot of them maybe have a general understanding of this skill shift, but they still fall back on trainer-led interventions because they don't necessarily have the confidence or the skill to kind of manage and, you know, somehow internally where they can kind of push and promote that sort of more learner-centric approach. So it's almost for a lack of any better ideas. They kind of go, oh, we'll just go to a provider and pay them and we'll beat them up if they don't deliver, rather than really having a true understanding of how to sort of develop that environment internally.
This is extracts from a CIBD report called How Do People Learn? It was actually commissioned and written by a fellow called Jake Reynolds. So the question really was, is e-learning something radically different, or can it be accommodated in the existing theories of learning generally? And what Jake came up with came from 4 separate academic industrial psychology traditions. And those 4 clusters were learning as behaviour, learning as understanding, knowledge construction and social practice. Those were the 4 major threads of our understanding. Learning of behaviour is the one you all basically know, which is reinforcement. And what Jake did was say that with all of these conceptual models, you can talk about how people learn for work, at work and through work. So what he did in a whole series in these tables is indicate the sort of interventions that may well be consistent with this fundamental approach to learning. So behavioralism is the first one, a belief that you can in fact through stimulation actually get people to behave in a certain way. Learning is understanding how people internalize, how they connect with the world about us, and how they actually interact with the world about us. But for most of the sort of things that you're doing in your work, I think it's the other theories that I hate to call, I would never call them higher level theories, but these are theories that I think are more relevant at the more senior level. The first thing is what might be called the constructivist theory. And what it argues is that constructivists view the individual as a very active agent in their own learning. And that means knowledge is very subjective and heavily dependent on context. And essentially, individuals only assign meaning to knowledge through their own experience, and then it becomes usable. The social aspects of learning, and this is certainly well on the agenda at present, that people learn most effectively in groups through their interchange with each other, and that learning is fundamentally a social activity, and it's about peer group reinforcement, etc. When you put the last two together, which is the constructivist aspects of learning and the social aspects of learning, you get socio-constructivism. So that's what socio-constructivism is about. It's that people want to construct their own knowledge. They will in fact construct their own knowledge from the existing framework that they carry with them already, but that they will do it best in a group with each other. I was undoubtedly speeding, I'm not proud of it. I was doing 38 in a 30 mile an hour area, and I was offered the choice of either a fine and 3 points on my licence or attendance at a speed awareness course, and you pay £64 or whatever. I dutifully drove in there, half a day in a Suffolk hotel, found about 30 people present other than me. Not those of us who've been on it. From the trainer's point of view, what is the learning challenge there, anyone?
No learner motivation.
Well done, absolutely. In fact, say a bit more than that. Any learner motivation?
Well, they're happy that they didn't get the fine and the 3 points, but their motivation to actually engage and participate in that half day is going to be pretty low.
Bit more than that, I think. I mean, there's a spread. We'll come back to that, but what have these people got in common? What have the 30 people got in common?
They got caught.
Criminals. They got caught. Yeah, we're all criminals, okay? We've all been speeding. Other than that, what are you going
forced to attend?
Being forced, well, you've got the choice of attending or pay the fine, but yeah, you're forced to attend. Other than that, what have they got in common?
Not much else.
Nothing. 17, isn't it, now for driving? I can't remember. They're all over 17 and they're driving. So they range from 17, and judging by appearance, to 190 there. And their motivation is not, in fact, picking up forced to attend, okay? What does that say about the motivation of some of them?
You're going to be resentful.
That's right. So that's the first thing. You have a not insubstantial group of people who are resentful and surly there, okay? Next thing is, what about their levels of ability? What are they going to be like? Very, very variable. So there will be, if you take a group of 30 people, there will be at least 4 or 5 who will have difficulty reading and writing. You know, that's about the sorts of ratios. You will have a group of people in there who will be struggling. How much does the trainer know about the people there beforehand? Nothing. And literally nothing at all. What he did was he gave you a test at the beginning. He asked you to write down the learning objectives at the end. And what he did was a lot of quizzes with those Palm pilots. You've been on one. What was it that they were trying to put across? Knowledge, skills, judgment, or attitude?
Probably mostly knowledge.
Yeah, okay. Say more. So what were they doing?
Trying to teach you the best way to drive.
Well, what they did a lot with me was what the speed limit was.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they just actually, they test you, okay? Yeah, so you went on it, did you, Zingy?
That's the difficulty with it, because
Yeah.
most people knew what it was, but they just didn't care, they just drove
That's
past it.
the
Yeah.
thing.
Okay, so, right, excellent, we're on nice little grounds. So that's knowledge. So most people knew what it was. I mean, I'm not sure they did actually, but let's accept that. Most people knew what they wanted, but didn't care. That's attitudes. I am questionable on generational differences. Let me tell you my position, and you decide your own. You decide your own. I think actually that learning is not very different. I think that we have not evolved very much since the swamp in terms of how the brain is had. Well, we haven't. The biological evidence is we haven't. However, the situation and context in which we work and learn has changed considerably. Therefore, what I will accept on generational differences is that each generation has grown up with a greater appreciation of technology. And that goes right the way through. The generation of 17, 18-year-olds are using technology as a substitute for interpersonal communication in more and more ways. But I question how much that's actually going to affect learning in the long run. That's for you to decide. The real challenge with 50% of the population using PCs all the time, 25% using other forms of technology, and that figure is going to increase and increase and increase. That the real challenge, this is from Professor Graham Martyn of Glasgow, is the systemic relationship amongst technology, organisations and people. That, I think, is where the future of the economy and the future of learning is going. None of these theories are dominant or right, that you must look at all of them and decide what is appropriate under the circumstances.